Hello, this is what enlightenment in 2025 sounds and looks like, okay? And I don't care about what anybody else says. I care about this because I know what this is, and I know that this is going to have a big impact. And if enlightenment doesn't have any impact or doesn't have any big impact, it is meaningless. And so the very fact that nobody wants to hear about this and that there are so few people that are actually responding, and that it all remains to be seen if my suggestion is going to be picked up. My suggestion is that people need to get their act together and that people in 2025 can verify every word that I say on each of my videos and everything that I write. On my X account you can read my writing and my exchanges with artificial intelligence, which is really very interesting because it's more streamlined than my my videos on which I just go on and on about stuff. But no, I mean, of course, writing about stuff is different than speaking about stuff. But in any case, I hope, I wish, I'm going to continue with my embodied language, and I hope other people are going to discover their morning. How are you doing? I hope that other people are going to discover their embodied language. That would be great, because if you would discover the difference between your usual way of talking, which I call disembodied language, and what I have here, embodied language, you would be enlightened too. Because your ongoing embodied language is your language of your language enlightenment. And that is what I propose. And so if you want to have embodied language with me and celebrate your language enlightenment with me in 2026, then you gotta get going and begin to sort of just talk with yourself and say like, well, okay, is he right? Is it true what he says, that when I listen to myself then everything changes? Well, that's for you to find out, and that's for you to admit, and that's for you to get used to because there's a lot of getting used to. And are you gonna do it? Are you gonna do it? Are you gonna talk out loud with yourself, and are you gonna have your sense of like, wow, I can listen to myself instead of not listen to myself? I can have embodied language instead of disembodied language. Now, that is absolutely fantastic. And it is even more, good morning, it's even more fantastic to, I mean, of course it's fantastic to have embodied language on your own. No, it's not more fantastic. No, sorry. It is additionally fantastic. You see, if you manage to stop your disembodied language, because that's what you need to do, if you manage to stop your disembodied language, which means if you manage to actually catch yourself in the act of not listening to yourself, and if you manage to say to yourself, oh my God, I am just going on and on about stuff, but I am not listening to myself. Of course, that's why I'm going on and on about stuff, because I am not listening to myself. I'm just totally out of touch with myself. And when you keep on talking with yourself alone, when you keep on experimenting, you find out that you are almost permanently engaged in disembodied language, in which you do not listen to yourself. Yes. And so when you begin to listen to yourself, you realize like, wow, I am listening to myself perhaps for the first time in my life. Yes, and not only that, I'm talking with myself because that's why I'm listening to myself. Yeah, I am listening to myself because I am talking with myself. Yeah, and because I'm saying things to myself which are totally meaningful to me, and which are totally applicable, which are totally true, which are totally necessary. Yeah, that is what is going to happen if you do what I ask you to do. Yeah, if you in 2025 take up the challenge, the individual challenge. This is what we are challenged. We are each individually challenged by our own ability to be free. And that freedom, the freedom of the individual freedom, that can only be achieved if our language matches the experience of our individual freedom. I mean, that's not anything fancy. That's not anything, outlandish. That's not anything fabricated or anything fantasized. No, your language, your embodied language, that is, your embodied language fits with your individually lived experience. But your disembodied language, in which you just keep on talking and having conversations, having relations, but you're not listening to yourself, and you're not in touch with yourself. You're not, we say you're not conscious of yourself, but of course that is all just nonsense. This whole talk about consciousness is nonsense, because there is no inner language. All language is overt. So what we call consciousness is a covert phenomenon, presumably an imaginary covert phenomenon, a fantasy. So consciousness is a fantasy of inner language. Yeah, you may quote me on that. Maximus said, consciousness is a fantasy of inner language. I've never said it like that before, but I say it like that today. And so, going back again to the initial topic, that this is what an enlightened person sounds like. This is what an enlightened person looks like. Yeah. In 2025. Just sit back during the rest of this video and begin to pay attention to, how do I actually sound? How do I actually speak? And what am I saying? You can understand it. Yeah. But are you going to apply it? Are you going to say like, okay, yes, I can understand it, but of course it is one thing to say, okay, I've understood him. How about you talking with yourself and you understanding yourself? That's a different matter. Yeah. And so, you can call it applying what I say to yourself, but I wouldn't even call it that. And you will hear me say things like this very often, when one moment I say this and the next moment I say something else, which is kind of like more of a translation of what I just said, because a lot needs to be continuously translated, because you are now having embodied language. Yeah, when you have embodied language, you need to translate what you have previously tried to address with disembodied language, which you couldn't address it. You couldn't really express it, your own individually lived experience. And now, here it is. You have, hello, hello, I'm going this way. Hi, have a good day. Hi. Yeah, you now have your it is possible for you to do what I do, but you got to do it. Yeah, if you do not do it, it's not going to happen by itself, because you need to acknowledge, like, okay, I have been involved in this way of talking in which I wasn't listening to myself, and That's what everybody has. Yeah, that's normal, or normal. That's considered to be normal. It's not normal. It's abnormal. Once you have embodied language, what you have been considering normal is abnormal, and what is abnormal is normal. So it's abnormal to listen to yourself and to speak with yourself, yeah, because normally people supposedly they talk with each other and they listen to each other. Yeah, and speaking with yourself and listening to yourself, now that is abnormal, right? No. It is different in embodied language. Yes, are you still listening to me? Are you coming along on this exploration of embodied language with a person who is enlightened? Will you allow yourself to admit that your enlightenment is possible? Because that is what listening to me actually implies. Yeah? If you really listen to me, you are allowing the possibility that you may actually also be enlightened. And of course, just a second. Of course, there's work to be done, yeah? I mean, if you do not stop, as I have said, your usual way of talking in which you do not listen to yourself, if you do not catch yourself and say like, oh gosh, that is why, now I get it. I wasn't listening to myself while I speak. And because I wasn't listening to myself, I was, you could say I was speaking unconsciously. No, I was speaking in a way that my language didn't match my individually experienced reality. It couldn't do that. And so the language that I was involved in when I wasn't listening to myself is a language which disconnects me from myself, which dissociates me from myself. It is a dissociative language. Disembodied language is a dissociative phenomenon. And now you're listening to an enlightened person who says to you that you can have embodied language. I have embodied language, and you can hear that I have embodied language. And you can feel that what I say is having to do with the fact that I don't speak to you automatically. I don't speak to you from my conditioning history with disembodied language. I listen to myself. Yeah. And I can tell you about the difference between disembodied language and embodied language. And I can tell you about my language enlightenment. Yeah. This is my language enlightenment. Yeah. And when I say this is my language enlightenment, I have nothing to point to. I have nothing to be fixated on. As a matter of fact, I have nothing to say. But I can still keep talking. That's an odd thing with me. Yeah, or an odd thing. I believe it is totally natural that once you begin to discover your embodied language, I believe it's totally natural that you then really would like to talk more with yourself, that is, and also discover more and also express more. And in spite of your enlightenment, because you feel enlightened. And what is this enlightenment? The enlightenment is dealing with the fact that there is no inner language. Yeah. So the illusion of inner language is completely gone. when you have ongoing embodied language. There doesn't exist any mind. There doesn't exist any language inside of you. There is no inner conversation that you have with yourself. All of that was fantasy created by your disembodied language. Yeah. So you can say, oh, now I feel so quiet. Now I'm speaking out of silence. I'm speaking out of this enormous space which is there because I'm no longer hanging on to my words. And yeah. And all of that is true. But if you continue to speak, there's so much to say. Because now you can finally say it. And you may find yourself, like me, spending the rest of your life just saying what you want to say. What I also wanted to say is that my enlightenment sounds like this and looks like this. And yeah, you of course also wanted to express your true self. Yeah, you also wanted to, not to be heard by others, but to be heard by you. Yeah, not to be acknowledged by others, but to be acknowledged by you. And not to be enjoyed, and also expressed, and also understood, and also you want your language enlightenment to be lived, yeah? You want that to be a living experience that is not in any way disturbed or prevented or inhibited by your language, because that is what has happened in the past. Yeah, that is what has happened with your disembodied language, where your language prevented you from being yourself. That's it. Yeah. How can your language be any good if what you say is not listened to by you? Yeah. You have not done that. So I hope that in 2025, there's still a couple of months left, you're going to do that. And then maybe we will have embodied language together in 2026, where we have not only embodied language together, no, we will be sharing our language enlightenment. Yeah. And that sharing of that language enlightenment is, of course, the ability that we each have acquired to use our language correctly. It's just as simple as that. Because in my opinion, as an enlightened person, nobody cares to ask me, but in my opinion, not listening to yourself and still speaking is incorrect. And yes, you can say this is just what everybody else does, and that's true. And you want to do what everybody else does because that's group behavior, that's fitting in, that is, everything what everybody does inadvertently. But if you want to be yourself, if you want to be an individual, if you have you could say, the dissatisfaction with your group behavior that you couldn't be yourself, because there must be some sort of a friction, a conflict, a tension about your language, which is never quite matching with what you want to say. You try to say it in you try to express it, and people have of course been very creative with their language. They have been so creative, poetic, intellectual, descriptive. They have been so elaborate, and they've invented so many new words and so many new terms. And we speak about mindfulness, and we speak about consciousness, and we speak about understanding and empathy and a willingness to be accountability, willingness to admit that you are wrong, or a willingness to explore. Of course, all of that is for the most part related to the illusion of inner language, because that's the stuff you're thinking about constantly, and you're not just deciding to think about it, even though you may tell yourself that, or you may believe that you are doing that voluntarily. No, your thinking is not a voluntary thing. Your thinking, your imagination, imagination is of course totally overblown, but you're constantly swamped by these so-called thoughts, by your fantasies about inner language, in which you are presumably saying something inside of your head to yourself. And the reality is that there is no inner language. Yes, the sun is shining bright today, and you're listening to an enlightened person, a person who in 2025 is saying that language enlightenment is inevitably revealed by a person's ongoing embodied language. It is as simple as that. And of course, this revelation has to happen for each individual by him or by herself. So that you, on your own authority, can say, wow, this is really different. It is. And it's not just that this one experience is different. No, everything is different after you begin to, not to apply, but after you begin to interpret with that experience what has happened to you. Because once you are able to have a little bit of embodied language, you're going to use these few moments that you are able to have some embodied language. Initially it's just a few moments, and then you get better at it, and it will last a little longer. But these moments that you are able to have embodied language, you're going to use those moments to reinterpret what has actually happened when you were having disembodied language. When you were struggling, when you were traumatized, when you were hurt, when you were upset and stressed and angry, you were hateful, you were blaming everybody, and you were, being a victim, or you either victimized somebody else, or you felt like a victim yourself. And as we all know or have heard somewhere, that the victimizer is of course himself the victim in one way or another, because why would anyone with embodied language victimize anybody? There's no such thing. There's no such thing. With embodied language, you're going to be a moral person. You're going to be a harmless person. You're going to be a person who is at ease with him or with herself. And such at easiness is never going to harm anybody else. It's never going to intrude on anybody else's life. No, it is only when people are dissatisfied with themselves, conflicted with themselves, troubled with themselves, that they are imposing themselves on each other. And then supposedly they are so moral, they are so truthful, or they are so important, so meaningful. But in my opinion, it's all meaningless. Everything that is being said with disembodied language is meaningless. Do you still hear me? Do you still hear my sound? Do you see me? I'm looking at you. And believe it or not, I'm also listening to you. I hear your disembodied language every day. And I have been hearing it for so long. I have been recognizing it for so long. And yeah, ever since I started to listen to myself, I began to sort of just do this whole process of translation, and yeah, that never stops. There's so much to be done in this linguistic Copernican revolution. Yeah, that's how Kroc described it, that I'm proposing a linguistic Copernican linguistic evolution, which basically means something like a gigantic revolution. And I might as well just say that Copernicus, of course, I quite frankly, I would have to look it up, what his big discoveries were. I believe it had to do with the situation of. No, I cannot really say for sure. Sorry, I I do not exactly recall. I must have read it somewhere what Copernicus's big contribution to science was. But in one, let me just make one thing clear. I am absolutely sure that Copernicus, his discovery, and you can look it up yourself, and why should I have to, I don't know, even tell you about this, but why should I have to refer to somebody else? That's what I'm saying, you know, whether it's Copernicus or anybody else, or Darwin or whoever. But okay, let's say I'm proposing a major shift, a major cultural shift, yeah? That cultural shift is going to happen if you are going to do what I ask you. Yeah, and we are going to massively, millions of people, if it happens, yeah, millions of people are going to be talking with each other and having embodied language, not just with me, but with each other. And they're going to come out of their illusion of inner language together, and they're going to celebrate their language enlightenment without me, because I don't have eternal life, you know. But okay, so going back to Copernicus, I'm sure that Copernicus has made a great contribution to science. That's why it is important. That's why, yeah. But the field of linguistics hasn't produced anything of any use, yeah. And yeah, you can of course make it seem as if it is important, but if there was any validity to any involvement in our verbal behavior, it would have to do with the realization that the speaker is, of course, himself or herself the listener, and that the speaker and the listener are therefore one in the speaker who speaks. And such a speaker who therefore listens to himself is listened to very differently by the listener who is not the speaker, and that is what you're listening to. Yeah. All right, there's some people coming by, and I just. Hi, good morning. Hi. And so you're now listening to such a speaker who is himself the listener, and yeah, that's a whole different. Yeah, a whole different. I would say a whole different way of life. My life is very differently. I am not part of any group. Even though I am an American, and even though I support America, even though I'm fully aware that America is the only country in the world where individuals have real freedom. Yeah? European countries are currently clamping down on the freedom of speech, which has existed there, but which is no longer existing because there's no constitution that guarantees the freedom of speech. But in the United States, we have the freedom of speech. And even though people have tried to erase that under the Biden administration and Kamala Harris and all the left-wing idiots, the Marxist, pro-Hamas, anti-Semitic creeps from the left, yeah, it is unbelievable how they have, in the name of their community, because that's all what they're hiding behind, right? They are in the left, they are always speaking on behalf of the community, on behalf of the collective, presumably, yeah. They are going to take away your individual freedom, yeah, your freedom of speech. But we have as a group, as Americans, we have the freedom of speech, so we can say what we say without being retaliated for that, without being discriminated on that part. Yeah, we have the freedom of speech, so we may agree to disagree in this country, and that's a good thing, because this is how individualism can begin to emerge, and this is how America is the country of, yeah, you could say rugged individualism. The country where I come from, the Netherlands, yeah, it is a socialistic country, and it is a country where the collective is like a wet blanket, basically, yeah, and individualism is only paid lip service to, actually. And so I'm speaking to you as an American, and I still am part of, yeah, I have a job also in a supermarket, and I do what I need to do my job. And I don't want to go into this or so to further elaborate on that, because I don't want to talk about that. But, you know, that's just what I do. But other than that, yeah, and I consider myself a conservative, because I am in favor of the values, yeah, the Christian, Judeo-Christian values that guarantee my rights, and that guarantee the rights for everyone. And in addition to being a person who is an American and who has the freedom of speech and who considers himself on the right side of politics, I do not identify with this group, because it is my identity as an individual that I identify with. Yeah, I identify with my embodied language, and I identify with my own individually lived experience, which is accurately expressed by my embodied language. And that is why I can invite you as an enlightened person. Yeah, you know, when I for the first time began to say that I was enlightened, I was about 20, early in my I was somewhere in my 20s or so, in my early 20s. I had discovered my embodied language, yeah, and I began to say to people that I was enlightened. and it was I created a whole uproar about it, because I was at that time still with Osho Rajneesh, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, formerly known as Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, and so I told everybody. And I also told other people, you know, there's other people who were involved in Advaita Vedanta, which is another school of, what is it, non-dualistic philosophy or something from India. And these people, they were also with with a guru. Osho was a guru. And I was with Osho, but I also was with this other so-called guru. They don't call that guru, but he was presumably what they call a jnani or something like that. Anyway, his name was Alexander Smith. I was also with Alexander Smith for just a very short while. I was infatuated with this philosophy of non-dualism. But long story short, because of these involvements, I somehow, because I was very dissatisfied and I was very upset about a lot of things back then, even though I always had a good time, but I tended to get frustrated with people who stopped me having fun, and I got very upset, so whenever it involved, let's say, the expression of meditation, what is actually going on when you meditate, and because I was meditating and stuff like that, and I was also interested in consciousness and all that stuff, but I wanted to talk about it, but people didn't want to talk about it, and I wanted to talk about it, and then so I got frustrated with all the conversations with all the people who are power tripping and who are, I don't know, claiming themselves to be some sort of guru. And I was just so frustrated with the conversation that I just basically says, well, screw it, I'm not going to talk with anybody anymore. And well, that sort of led to a situation where I ended up talking with myself. And you probably know that a lot of people who are crazy, they talk with themselves, but I talked out loud with myself in a different way than anybody else has ever talked with themselves, because I began to listen to my sound. And the listening to my sound was what revealed to me my embodied language. So it was not what I was saying, but how I was saying it, which revealed to me that what I was saying was important. Yeah. And so all of a sudden I heard myself. All of a sudden I realized like that I was listening to myself, and this is how I wanted to talk. And it was and then I had this revelation, you know, like, wow, I can talk like this, you know, I can just, without any practice, without any effort, without any preparation, I can just tap into this and talk like this. And so I instantly recognized my own enlightenment. However, this is an interesting twist. I had not acquired my embodied language yet. So it's very interesting how I had the experience, but the language that fit with that experience had not yet been acquired. And so then I was on this this path, if you want to call it that. I was on this discovery of how do I get to have the continuation of my embodied language, which of course involves catching yourself in your own conditioning with disembodied language and stopping it, acknowledging it and stopping it. You can only stop it by acknowledging it and not trying to stop it, because it's very odd how it is with your conditioning. As long as you're trying to stop your conditioning, it is not going to stop, because you're trying to stop it. You're trying to make it go away. There's no such thing as making your conditioning going away. Your condition is not going away by you trying to make it go away. Your conditioning with disembodied language, which is basically the fact that listening to others is more important than listening to yourself. So that conditioning, the listening to others, authority outside of yourself, is more important than listening to yourself. That you're not allowed to be your own authority. That you do not dare to be your own authority. That you do not know how to be your own authority. That you do not have the language to be your own authority. Well, all of that is involved. And so you cannot stop your history with disembodied language. You can only acknowledge it with your embodied language. And if you do that, then it stops. But you're not trying to stop it. And that was also something that I had to find out on the way, you know. It was not easy, and it was really complicated and problematic and troublesome. But I figured it out, and you will figure it out too, you know, if you are going to do it. So anyways, language enlightenment is what this is, you know. I'm sitting here on this beautiful bench in this wonderful small little park in the early morning in the sunshine, and I'm just making this video. Hi. And I enjoy talking like this, but there's nobody else here. Occasionally somebody's passing by, as you can hear, and I greet these people because I see them almost every morning on my ride on my bicycle. And I really recommend that you also listen to all my other videos on this channel and on my other channel, because they are all equally valuable. They're all equally unique. And I also sing songs about this, and I play on my ukulele. I write texts to existing melodies, and in which I just sort of also elucidate about the difference between disembodied language and embodied language, and all sorts of situations that occur with that, because it is an enormously multi-dimensional phenomenon. Once you I'm gonna leave the conversation here with this with this brief explanation that of course, when you have embodied language, you are not only going to leave your disembodied language behind, but you are also going to leave behind all the behaviors which were not having anything to do with language, except that they were mediated, or they were supported by, or even caused by your disembodied language. So you are involved in a lot of involuntary behavior. Your disembodied language is an involuntary behavior. Yeah, once you discover your embodied language, you realize that your disembodied language is an involuntary behavior. It's also really weird, because you believe that your disembodied language is involuntary behavior, but it's not true. Anyway, so all the other behavior that you have, which is related to disembodied language, it will also subside as your disembodied language subsides. And the behavior that fits with your embodied language, that is of course behavior that continues, and that that is enhanced by your embodied language. So anyways, your enlightenment just keeps getting better. There's just no end to it, to the ecstasy of your language enlightenment.